Hi, I'm Callie from CRK Training Blog. Welcome to another one of our Friday blog videos. And for this video, we're going to do something a little bit differently because we're doing a Q&A. So I receive a lot of questions via email, but sometimes when I receive one that I think the questions would probably apply to a lot of you watching, I thought it would be helpful to answer it here on the blog. So this question is from Anna. She actually had 3 specific questions that I'm going to address, and I just wrote them on my little cards here so I wouldn't forget. So Anna's first question was, my horse Ginny is 15 years old. Is she still able to learn new things or how to do something she already knows in a different way? So the short answer to this is yes, she can definitely learn new things. I find that horses can continue to learn at all ages, even though when they're young, just like people, that learning probably is going to come a little bit easier. The one consideration that I would have with an older horse is that they're going to have more reinforcement history for behaviors that they're doing. So those behaviors could be stronger, and that can be true for both good behaviors, ones that we like, and also for bad behaviors. So reinforcement history simply means that the horse has gotten some kind of a reward or a release of pressure from doing that thing, and the older they are, probably the more likely that they've been doing it longer, and it's going to take a little bit longer to extinguish or to change that behavior in the case of bad behavior that you're trying to get rid of. Anna's second question is as follows. My horse Ginny plays a lot with the bit, especially when she's excited or hot. Would you recommend trying a hackamore, or can this be sorted another way? So this is another excellent question, and this was one that I really wanted to share here because I think that horses that toss their head is a very common problem, and there's several ways that we can look at this, and there's one kind of most effective way for addressing the problem. So the first thing is to understand that most of the time when a horse starts to shake their head, the behavior comes first out of some kind of a frustration or an anxiety. So the horse is a little bit, kind of emotionally upset. They try shaking their head as kind of like a conflict behavior, and then they receive some kind of a release, and that's usually what makes them continue that behavior. So for example, we can see horses out in the field, maybe when they're running or they're getting excited or they're frustrated because their field mate came in early, and we'll see that horse shaking his head as he's going up and down the fence line or as he's standing at the gate. But we don't usually see him doing it repeatedly, constantly, again and again and again, whereas we do see that in ridden horses. And I believe what happens is that when we're riding and the horse shakes his head, if we're not very soft and following with our elbows, and we're not able to keep the contact with the bit consistent as the horse is shaking his head, the horse basically receives a release from the contact. Especially if the horse is frustrated and anxious, we've probably been pulling harder to try to keep that horse slow. So he shakes his head, that hard contact gets released, even if it's just for a second within that head shaking. But because the horse is finding a little bit of release in that contact through his head shaking, and he's not sure or he's not finding how to get it any other way, he continues the head shaking. So what you want to do to try to address this with your horse, the one way that I would really recommend is to think about or work on getting really following through your elbows so that you can keep the contact consistent. The best way to think about this is to keep your wrists straight for one, make sure that your fingers are closed on the reins, and just check that you're not tight in your hand and in your forearm, so that you're holding the reins firmly, but you're not tight in this lower part of your arm. And then when your horse shakes his head, maintain the position through your body and just let your hands follow so that that contact is not released until the horse does a more desirable behavior, like even just putting the head straight for a moment, stopping the shaking, or even better, getting a little bit of a lowering and a little bit of the stretch of the neck, and then release deliberately on that movement so that you're releasing on something that you want instead of the horse basically being able to kind of cause his own release through the head shaking. Now, Anna, I know that you mentioned as we went back and forth in email a little bit that your horse, you've been able to get through, or you've been able to help the problem a little already by having your horse back up. So when he starts the head shaking, you have him take a step back, and then you're that seemed to be helping the problem. And I would kind of pay attention to maybe when you're taking that step back. I think that can be a good exercise because it kind of helps teach the horse softness when he stops instead of stopping braced or stopping with, pushing or rooting on the bit. But I would wonder if maybe when you're getting that step back, as you're asking for the back, the horse has to stop shaking his head, and you're releasing then, you're kind of releasing deliberately for the step back, but perhaps it's also reinforcing, your horse Ginny stopping the head shake. So just be something to kind of watch there. For Anna's third question, she asks, again, my horse Ginny gets hot-headed over almost anything, and often she tries to canter when I go to ask her to trot. So what I would think about here is two things. The first, I would really work a lot on the basic response of slowing down and stopping. So this means probably doing a lot of slow transitions like walk and halt, or probably a lot of walk to halt first, and even then walk and slowing down within the walk, since the canter is happening when you ask for trot. So develop more responsiveness to the slow down and to the stop. So basically just your stopping cues. And then you can start to use that in the trot, and I would work a lot at the trot where maybe you ask for it and just be conscious of being really soft in how you're asking for the trot, that you're not accidentally, just bumping her too hard with your legs or doing something that is kind of triggering that more forward response into the canter. But really focus on that basic response of having her understand and also putting a little bit more value on slowing down. So this might mean lots of scratching and praise whenever she slows down. Sometimes I'll use food rewards to add more value to the halt or to help kind of train standing still. You've got to be careful, for safety when you're doing this with a horse that's really forward, but you can start it on the ground, training halt, training the voice cue, and just putting more value for the horse making the decision to slow down. And then the second thing to think about is if she's always trying to canter, and like you said in your question here, she seems like she does this when she gets excited, you can also look for some relaxation exercises. So give some thought to some ideas of what might help just calm her down. And this can be a little bit of an individual thing, but generally for horses, I find that rhythmic patterns, so things like circles, things like figure eights, where it's kind of the same repeating pattern, can be useful for just getting them to relax, especially if you're focusing on rewarding them for a position that can allow a little bit more calmness and softness in the muscles, like stretching down a little bit. So those are the two things that I would do, is think about some relaxation exercises that might help her, and then also work on the basic response of having her slow down and putting a little bit more praise, a little more reward, a little more value to the slow down and the stop. Thank you, Anna, for your questions. I enjoyed answering them today, and I hope that everyone else watching got some value from this as well. And if you have a question that you would like to ask and that you'd like to possibly have me answer in one of these videos, go ahead and put it in the comments below. Make sure that you're putting it in the comments at crktrainingblog.com. That's where you can go. That's where the best comments and conversation happens. That's where I'm reading and responding to the comments, and I'll look forward to seeing you there. Thanks for watching.